Can you tell me what programs you have for problem gaming, problem gamblers? How is someone who's going to sit at home do internet gaming? Like, is there something that shows if their bank accounts are going down, if they're doing iGaming and they're spending their whole life savings? How do you monitor that? I mean, I think in the casinos you have programs, and I see the billboards, 1-800-GAMBLERS. But can you tell me how much money you spend on educating the casinos and educating the public, and then what we're doing for these other forms?
Thank you, Representative. We have an Office of Compulsive and Problem Gambling at the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board, and they do a remarkable job of interacting with all the casinos, and they also go out into the community at senior fairs, at other events to bring an education component to compulsive and problem gambling. They work very closely with the Pennsylvania Council on Compulsive Gambling. And March is Compulsive and Problem Gambling Awareness Month, and they hold 2 conferences. But to answer your question directly, Act 42 of 2017 did a fantastic job of incorporating requirements to address compulsive and problem gambling. On the interactive side, there are numerous requirements. It's required, number 1, that there be patron-initiated options to control their gambling, either through limits on how much they can deposit over a certain period of time, limits on how long they play, limits on how much they can lose.
But those are self-imposed, so they can change those at any time.
Pardon me?
They can change those limits. They can go in and change. So if they say, well, I don't want to gamble more than $100 at a time, and then they decide, well, I want to keep playing, so I'm going to up that. Can they change that?
No, there's a required waiting period.
Okay.
Once they program in a limitation, they have to comply with that, and then there's a waiting period before they can resume their play. It's also permitted that they can suspend their own activity. So they can suspend their account for a week if they choose. We also are going to be applying a self-exclusion list that does take an initiative by the player, but it's been very effective on the land-based side.
Is there anything for family members? The spouse sees their account going down and down, not sure, the mortgage isn't being paid. Is there something that a spouse can do to get help? And does any of that money go to counties? So is that something that they have programs set up through the county systems?
Well, your first question is the harder one, because we consider it to be necessary that self-exclusion and voluntary limits be voluntary on the person who would like to limit their gambling activity. That's a component that we've always felt was required in order to restrict a person's ability to engage in illegal activity. That person has to voluntarily request that they have that exclusion placed on them. Your other question is, in addition to the legislature adopting these types of self-help programs, in all cases, they incorporate some additional funding to deal with treatment and education programs. That funding currently supports up to around $9 million a year to DDAP. And it should rise somewhat from the additional expanded gaming activities. And through DDAP and the grant programs that they have and their interaction that they have with the single county agencies, that money gets out to treatment providers.